New book is out this week. It is titled 15 Cents on the Dollar, How Americans Made the Black-White Wealth Gap. It takes a comprehensive look at the factors driving the racial wealth gap in the United States. And joining us right now are the co-authors of that book, Ebony Reed and Louise Story. And it's great to see them this morning. Full disclosure, I used to work with Louise at the New York Times, who went on to be a very big deal at the Wall Street Journal, and now has this new book out today. And it's a fascinating one. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.
Louise, I'm going to start with you. I know you've spent an enormous time putting together this book, and it's done a remarkable job just sort of looking at all of both the research, government data, financial institutions, your own polls, and you followed 7 individuals since George Floyd's death. And I'm so curious what the title of the book means and what you think you learned.
Sure. Well, the typical black family has 15 cents in wealth compared to $1 held in wealth by the typical white family. I'll say that again. The typical black family has 15 cents compared to $1 held by a white family. Many people don't know that. And that is true for when you compare averages and medians. So it's not just the billionaires pulling it up. And so we are on a mission to make that a nationally recognized statistic.
Ebony, you know, it seemed like when you look through the book that housing plays such a critical piece of this puzzle. But you found that the lack of participation in the stock market is also a huge component of the problem.
It is. The black-white wealth gap is like a spider web. There are so many factors that contribute to it. So yes, housing is a part of it, but also stock ownership. Inheritance is also a driver of the wealth gap as well.
When you think about it, you also looked at student loan credit expansion. And that obviously, to some degree, and maybe it's counterintuitive, has, in your mind, increased the disparity. Can you both speak to that? Because I think that's an issue that's right on the table right now.
Absolutely. There is a risk that despite the broader access to education, that the way it's been paid for through student loans that have disproportionately harmed the finances of Black and Latino Americans, that's continuing old patterns that have created and continued this black-white wealth gap. You know, we were at 15 cents on the dollar in the 1950s. It's moved around, but we're back at 15 cents on the dollar now.
And I'd like to just add that the Black Americans that carry student loan debt are more likely to delay other wealth building activities such as home ownership, such as participation in the stock market.
What do you think right now? There was a move, I think, after George Floyd's death among corporations across the country around DEI policies and really getting very active about creating pledges around goals, around hiring and the like. And it feels like there is now an almost anti-DEI movement taking place, a view that meritocracy should be the goal and that corporations might have made a mistake. What do you guys think of that?
Well, you know, DEI has become politicized. But at the end of the day, people can debate the policies. I will tell you a fact. The typical black family has 15 cents in wealth for every $1 the typical white family has.
I think ultimately, Andrew, once people are aware of that figure, which, by the way, many Americans are not aware of it, then they have to grapple with, is that okay with them? And if it's not okay and you don't like some of the existing programs, then, talk about what else. And by the way, you could also argue whether all the existing programs have worked, right, given that this gap has remained very large for a long time. And so as people debate these things, they might debate new ideas. But we just want to make sure people know the facts. We do not take political positions in our book. But we tell the stories of very compelling individuals. The book will make you think, it'll make you feel, and we hope that it will help this data become widespread.
Do you think, though, it's more focused? I mean, do you think that the problem are government policies ultimately, or do you think that it is racism in the workplace or other places, a combination of both? How do you weigh these things?
It is a combination of both, and we show that in the book through historical and also current day practices.
I think there's also a lack of understanding about wealth. You wouldn't believe how much people confuse wealth with income, even highly educated people. When we talk about this book to them, they say, well, I know the person who looks different from me, who sits next to me at work, is making the same pay, so what's the big deal? And they're not understanding the different circumstances that people are in. And these circumstances are not only what people are born into, but also, inheritance is given out throughout people's lives. And so people who are professionals working in the same place often have very different financial flows coming in and around their life and different assets. And it's not something people really talk about. It's kept private among friends and families. And the government does not actually collect or report all that much data on it.
You focused, by the way, on a bank that in the book that we've now had on the broadcast a bunch of times, Greenwood Bank, and it has a pitch to users and investors that it's aimed to recirculate money in the black community. But you found something slightly different in your investigation.
Well, Greenwood, as you know, is a fintech, and it's interesting. We dissect a little bit what fintechs are doing in banking, and we talk about how they're taking us back into the days when you and I covered the 2008 financial crisis, how they're a little bit able to benefit from a loophole in Dodd-Frank having to do with interchange fees. But yes, Greenwood is a fintech. They've promised to help close the black-white wealth gap. They've met a lot of challenges. It's founded by Andrew Young and Michael Render, the rapper Killer Mike. They have great intentions. But it's difficult starting something new. It's difficult to work in the black banking space, and they've hit a lot of roadblocks, and a lot of their customers have been disappointed so far, but it is early days.
Would you recommend an approach that covers everything? I'm talking about a friend of the show, Robert Johnson, talks about reparations. It would cost $14 trillion. But we have others on that say if we were to make lending standards the same for minorities as for everyone else, that might help. If you could make loans for business startups in communities that have a hard time getting loans, that's a way of doing it. Or you think all of the above. I mean, how aggressive would you get? Reparations, trillions of dollars of reparations, is that? You don't get political in the book, so you're not going to. Maybe student loan forgiveness, maybe everything.
So here's the way to answer, because we don't take a political position,
right.
But we did some calculations. I know we've got very numerate audience here, so we looked at the rate of change that's been happening when you compare the median families since 1989.
Right.
So if the gap continues converging at the rate it's been converging since 1989, which has had some ups and downs, it will be closed in 291 years.
Right. But do we use?
But that's your answer to it. Do you need something
government solutions, private sector solutions. But the government is ineffective at trying to figure these things out. You need the private sector somehow.
Nothing can happen without both.
Yes, right.
Nothing can happen without both.
290
The book
years.
is called 15 Cents on the Dollar. If you really want to understand these issues, do take a look at it. It's a fascinating read and really explains a lot about where we are in society.